is an interview with John Impagliazzo in Bologna in Italy on June the 28th, 2006 as part of the Oral History Project. John, could you just say your name into the machine so that we have got it correct?
John Impagliazzo.
Right, John, as part of our Oral History Project, we'd actually like to take you way back to the beginning. And talk to you about your parents. Did your parents have college degrees?
No, they did not. My dad came to the States when he was, he came in 1929. I don't recall exactly how old he was at that time, but probably around 25. And he was an officer in the military. In fact, he was the personal bodyguard of King Victor Emmanuel III, and so he appreciated education. In fact, his uncle was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in Lucca, Italy.
And your mom?
My mom was born in Providence, Rhode Island, and she was the firstborn of my parents in the United States. And so at that time things were difficult, and there was a tremendous amount of time devoted to keeping the family together financially, because my grandfather died at a very young age, right after they came to the United States. And so there were 5 sisters in the family, and what they did is they all worked to try to make one of the sisters become educational, and she was in fact the only one who graduated high school.
Okay. So neither of them were in any maths or science or engineering fields?
Oh, no.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes, one sister, and she went to college, but then she went into business school and was quite a good bookkeeper accountant, and her name is Serafina, and we call her Chicky, because when she was born, she looked like a little chicken, so that name stuck with her. And she now is the registrar for the county of Newton in Georgia.
Okay. Were you a good student at school?
Yeah, I was always a good student. I always enjoyed learning.
And you took courses in math and science?
Always in high school, yes. And in college, I gravitated to engineering right away. I had 2 loves. One was music, one was engineering. And the question was, could I make a living playing music and composing music and conducting orchestras? And the answer was no. The probability of that was nil, given the rate of success for artists at the time. So I went to my avocation at that time, which was electronics. I was very, very good in electronics, and I pursued my first degree in electronics.
Were you and your sister given the same encouragement to go to college?
Oh, yes. Yeah, my father highly valued education, so did my mother. And they felt that was the one thing that no one could ever take from you. And I can still hear them tell me that they can steal everything from you, but never your education.
Wow. Was there anybody else in those early years that inspired you, or was a mentor to you that helped you pursue your career in engineering, physics, math, science?
No, not really. I just fell in love with it. I did quite a few things when I was a teenager with radios. I used to, sound silly now, but I used to go to the town dump and fetch out all the old radios that were discarded. And then I would disassemble them, save all the good parts, and reconstruct them into other parts. And my friend and I think we built the first stereo system ever on the planet. It was probably in 1956 or 7 that we did that. Back at that time, they had binaural sound, which was mixed sounds with 2 speakers, but it was never stereo. And we built a preamplifier that would actually split sound into separate components, and therefore could channel it into a mixed way into what we know today as stereo.
Wow.
It was very fascinating to listen to this in the late 1950s, because it was really a startling sound at that time. Unfortunately, I never had the foresight, neither did my friend, to patent this. So, but that's the way life is.
So you finished high school and then you went to college. Why did you choose the college that you went to?
I went to SUNY with Farmingdale, which was a technical college. And I went there, first of all, because it was close to home. Didn't feel like going away from home and spending money in dorms for useless reasons. And besides, I used to play music on weekends to make ends meet, and I had a band. And so that helped out on the financial side to keep things going. And from there, we went to...
So you went to college knowing what you wanted to major in?
I really liked electronics then, and I majored in electronics, and I graduated 5th in my class of about 300.
And you went from there to
St. John's.
St. John's?
Yeah, I went to St. John's because I started to enjoy the science of electronics more than just the electronics, and I really wanted to know why things worked the way they were. So I started studying physics and became fascinated with physics, and tried to pursue that area. But I realized, even after I was a double major in college. I'm one of the few people who graduated, I think, with a baccalaureate degree of I don't know how many credits, probably near 200 to 300 credits. And because I transferred credits from one school to the other and switched majors, so I lost about 90% of my credits, so I had to redo that. But I did a physics and mathematics double major at St. John's, and I finished that in 3 years.
Okay, and then you stayed on and did a master's degree.
Yeah, I won a National Science Foundation fellowship to SUNY Stony Brook, which is an upcoming university at that time, and I went there and pursued engineering, which was at that time engineering analysis, which was the mathematical side of engineering, and that was basically a very applied engineering math pursuit.
So when you finished your first master's degree and there's a gap to your second master's degree, what did you do then? Did you go straight into teaching?
Yes, I was planning to go into industry, but I did enjoy teaching. I guess it had to do with the music, because since I was 16 years old, I was always teaching young students music, guitar or piano, and I just enjoyed seeing these youngsters accomplish things, and probably one of the pinnacle areas was when I did a piano recital. All my students got together and we did a piano recital for parents and relatives, and it was very, very nice, and it was so grand to see youngsters learn and accomplish something. And from there I thought that maybe teaching would be acceptable, and I tried it, and I've been with it ever since. I've also worked in industry in summers, and
you started out teaching math?
I started out.
John, you were telling us about teaching music and how you enjoyed that, so that you went on to teach math.
Yes, I was always.
Finished your master's degree.
Yeah, I was always good in mathematics.
You started teaching first of all at Adelphi University as an adjunct professor.
No, actually, I started teaching at SUNY Farmingdale, which was my alma mater for my first degree. It was a little strange going back to the place you studied because your teachers were now your colleagues, and you got to know the inner politics of the things you didn't really know all the time as students. But it was a good experience, and I taught mostly engineering calculus and through differential equations and things.
So how did you get into computer science?
Well, when I was studying physics, this is like, I guess, the early 1960s, I used some of my electronic parts to build an analog digital converter to convert digital numbers into binary. And that seemed to be fun. I also had taken audited an online course through television. Online was television in those days at MIT on the theory of computing and how computers work. And when I was at Stony Brook, Aaron Feinerman, who is well known in the early days, pioneers of computing, he became the computer person at SUNY Stony Brook. And I had sat in on a class of Aaron's, which was rather interesting, and it kept perking my interest in that. But later on, when I was doing mathematics, and I started writing my first book at that time, I began to try to express engineering things in a graphic way, and I got involved with the Fourier series and Fourier transforms, which is very akin to engineering, and showed, at least graphically, how to generate these series, how to create analog waves with with other analog waves. And so you can create all kinds of things, including like square waves using analog methods and sines and cosines. And so that was very challenging to be able to do this. And I also started building tutorials in the early 1970s on computers, so students could learn mathematics doing tutorials. And at that time we started with programming in BASIC, and so this built tutorials in math and tutorials to teach BASIC to students. Seems like yesteryear, really yesteryear, time warp when that was going on. But it was very interesting, and things like that really hadn't been done before.
So you became a professor then in computer science?
No, I was always in mathematics at that time, and then I started really enjoying mathematics. I liked was fascinated by some of the theories in mathematics and how they related to computing in some ways, and then pursued my master's in mathematics, and then my fifth degree was my PhD in math, which was also another nice thing because I chose an applied area of math which dealt with the biomathematics, as they call computational biology, as they would probably call it today. And where I modeled population dynamics using different methods of mathematics. And Springer Verlag learned about my thesis, which hasn't even been completed yet, and they immediately offered me a contract to publish my thesis, which they did right away. And it was really a breaking thing because I solved one of the unsolved problems in mathematical demography at the time, which was a particular method of doing solutions that way.
So why did you choose the Delphi University to do your last two degrees?
They were close to home and where I worked. I also was adjunct there and taught courses, and they had actually an outstanding department. Courant Institute of Mathematical Sciences from NYU, New York University, a good group of that faculty left Courant, and they opened up the math department, a special research department at Adelphi. And so basically I got my degree as pseudo-Courant because it was basically the same teachers. And so it was very, very rigorous. It was not an easy thing. You really had to know your math very well to get through it.
Was there anybody in those early years when you were beginning teaching and still studying that was like a mentor to you, or somebody that shaped your
Not
future
really.
career?
Not really. I was guided by my thesis advisor, obviously, dissertation. But I basically did it on my own. I wasn't very fortunate in the sense that my daughter was handicapped, and it took a tremendous amount of time on one's life to take care of her and to do things and earn money. Medical bills were outlandish, and almost any time you earned a dollar, it disappeared. We don't have a social medical system in the States. Everything is private. And it could wipe you out right away. So I did quite a bit of teaching, sometimes at 4 universities at the same time in the same semester. One time I counted, I was teaching 7 different courses from elementary math and computing to advanced differential equations at these places. Yeah, sometimes it's just the way the dice roll, and you have to do these things. But you do what you have to do.
Okay. Are you happy to share your teaching philosophy with us?
Well, I think students need to become engaged, need to try to understand what they're doing, why they're doing the things they do. It's okay to show them tricks and how you can take shortcuts to do things, but I was always the type that whenever a student had a question, I would go back and do it from foundation up, so they understood where a result came from. It's particularly in mathematics, where most of the time, at least in calculus, solutions are concrete, that you actually get an answer, and you don't have to hypothesize too much about it, especially if they're engineering type problems.
Do you think the teaching style has changed over the years?
Yes, it's changed from the kindergarten right through the universities.
Your own teaching style?
Pardon? My own teaching style? I don't think too much. I don't think so. Obviously, you have to teach differently if you're teaching computer courses versus math type courses.
Can you explain that a wee bit further?
Well, in math type courses, you begin with concrete premises that you assume to be true, and then you can build something from there in a very logical way. Sometimes computing can get a little bit hit and miss. Try this and recompile, and try that and recompile. And the students constantly do that, and they spend endless hours in labs doing that. Probably the good old days were better with the punch cards, because you had to think 5 times before you hit the punched card, because you didn't want to wait for the 48 or 24 hours for the turnaround. But I think generally my style is still the same, to engage students.
Okay, just want to change direction now for a while. You have a very impressive, on your curriculum vitae, record in professional organisations.
Yes.
So could you tell us what types of professional organisations you've belonged to?
Well, several. I guess I started with the Computer Society and ACM back in go way back. I started with the Institute of Radio Engineers, which does not exist anymore. That merged with the American Institute of Electrical Engineering, and then became the IEEE. So I was one of the early members of that. Then I dropped out of that for a while because of things on the home front with my daughter. My first publication was with IEEE. and there I invented or actually discovered multimodal propagation and antenna propagation waves, and became the lead article of the journal for that year. But I didn't pursue the organizational stuff in those early days. But in the 1980s, things started to change, and I started being more involved with organizations. So I began with ACM, with the Computer Society, and recently, in the last 10 years, I've been active with IFIP and chairing their 9.7 committee. I ran the 60 conference in 1996, and that was the kickoff of the 50th anniversary, with also with Big Blue and I think it was Big Blue and Kasparov doing the chess game, and the 50th anniversary of the ENIACs. So it was a busy time in Philadelphia, and so I got involved that way. And then a year later, Jim Miller announced that he wasn't going to do the 60 Bulletin anymore, that he was giving it up. And I says, gee, it might be something I might be interested in doing. And so I started doing that in 1997, and I'm still doing that. So right now I'm involved with that. I've been affiliated with the Ed Board since 1986. Since 20 years, where did they go? In one capacity or another, and particularly chairing its accreditation committee for 12 years. I don't do too much with the Computer Society. They ask me to do tasks from time to time. But I am involved.
That's the
IEEE Computer Society. But I am involved with IEEE. I am the treasurer of the IEEE History Center, and I chair its financial committee for IEEE. So I'm very involved with the IEEE people in different ways. So basically, those are the organizations
Okay. How do you think your involvement with these organizations has shaped your career?
Well, it certainly made them a lot busier. I don't know if it shaped my career. My career is in its limelight at this time, although I still feel like I have 50 more years, but in reality I only have numbered years. But I don't think it has changed my career at all in terms of working. Hofstra doesn't recognize the hours that people who volunteer for these organizations do, and the time they spend. But I guess professionally on the world front it has. And what it has done is, if I have done anything, I have tried to expose computing history worldwide. And I've run several conferences already through IFIP on computing history, one for the Nordic countries, history and computing and education in France. And later in August of this year, I'll be doing the History of Computing Education 2 in Santiago with IFIP again. But I guess the feather in the cap is the SOTACOM conference that I'm doing in a couple of days. This is a very high-profile, week-long conference on perspectives on Soviet and Russian computing. It is I don't know how it happens, but I was able to reconstruct the Soviet Union historically, including the Russian Academy of Sciences. In fact, I'm doing a presentation next Tuesday, which will involve comparative computing education, East versus West. And the Eastern perspective will be given by the director of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and also the chief industrial, industrial representative for Microsoft Research. And on the western part, I'll be doing the comparative history, the U.S. perspective, and the president of IFIP will be doing the European perspective. And this has gotten so much acclaim so far that they made it a plenary session in the conference, and they're going to do a mass media broadcast of this here. And I have no idea who will be seeing this, but I guess I should be wearing a jacket and tie.
Of all the things that you have done for these professional organisations outside of your normal, is this the one you'd be most proud of?
You mean the event?
Yeah, the conference next week.
I would say this is perhaps the greatest achievement. This would never have happened without me because of the politics within Russia. To get the Ukrainian camps talking to the Siberian camps and of computing, confrontational perhaps philosophies of computing, to actually get them all together in the same place and make presentations, and the quality of the people who are coming. These are some of the most outstanding pioneers and scientists from the Soviet Union. It really is an accomplishment. I can't take the credit only myself, but because without other support within Russia, it's impossible to do these things. But for this to actually happen is surely an accomplishment.
John, you've also spent some time on your sabbaticals working outside of the USA. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I enjoy doing international things. As you well know, I helped out at Unitech with their master's and doctoral programs. There are other people I guess people are starting to know me as someone they should call. So the Chilean government, through one of their grants and consortium of universities, has invited me to look at their computing curriculum and to revamp all of computing within Chile, or at least make recommendations for that. To be asked to do that is sort of honorary.
In Estonia?
Well, in Estonia, yes. Estonia, I don't know how that happens, but I think I know where it started. I was invited by Tony Clear to speak in New Zealand, and I gave a talk at the New Zealand Computer Society, and then after that I gave a talk at the NACCQ conference, and in the audience there was a person from Sweden who heard me speak about accreditation and things of that sort. I believe it was she who, through other circles, sort of suggested that the Estonian government call me and invite me to help set up. Well, they already had their accreditation system set up, but they have yet to do one accreditation process in Estonia at that time. And so they made me the sort of the leader, the team chair, as it was, and they asked me to conduct this process at 3 universities for baccalaureate, master's, and doctoral level programs. So just in one shot in 1 week, we had to do 9 programs with a committee of 3. It was very exciting. In fact, the problem was they didn't have hardly any documentation of what to look for. They had some crude standards, so I helped reconstruct the standards for them, and I also set up the model by which reports were to be done, and I also created the forms to help them do their visits. And they're still using my forms today, so it's very good.
You've also been involved in accreditation visits within the USA.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to share some of that with us?
Yeah, I've been doing that since 1987. I've been involved with CSAB and then ABET. I don't recall how many programs I've done, but it's close to 40, maybe 35 accreditation programs worldwide. Of those, maybe 10 or 15, maybe 15 within the United States. Maybe more. It should be more than 15 because I've been doing it for about 18 years.
Have you spent much time supervising postgraduate students?
No, we at Hofstra we only have a master's program, so we don't have postgraduate work. So that, I guess, is not something I've been familiar with, though it would be exciting to do.
Have you faced any particular challenges in your work environment? Challenges that have, for example, juggling commitments at home and at work?
Commitments between home and work?
Well, any particular challenges that you have faced so that has made it your work more difficult?
Yeah, probably the lock-headedness of some of my fellow faculty members. When I was department chair, I took a no-nonsense attitude, and I know I fired more people than I hired, because I didn't want any dead wood around. So whenever it came time for reappointments, they never got them, they didn't get tenure, and I tried to build a high-quality faculty, which I did. In fact, I was proud that back in the middle 1990s, or late 1990s, we achieved 50% women and 50% male in teaching faculty, full-time teaching faculty, although that has now subsided again to women not being in the majority or equal. I have a sensitivity to that. I don't think that, women in computing, as you well know, we've done the 2002 Inroads issue, which has taken a few years off my life. And recently, last year, we produced the CD, Pathways, Women in Computing. And so there's always an interest in trying to get a more diverse presence in the classroom. But the real challenge is trying to get faculty members within my own faculty to come around and see the light on some things. But some people are just stubborn. In terms of other challenges, I just take them the way they come.
Okay, I've decided the point. What about compromises? What compromises have you had to make?
Compromises?
In the course of your career?
Sometimes you always have to compromise what you're doing with your time. I don't think I've compromised any ideals for the sake of one thing or another. I just feel that I just do what I do, and until somebody doesn't like what I'm doing anymore, fine. My current challenge is, after I get rid of this next week or two with the Russian conference and October with the Chilean conference, I'm the associate editor of the Encyclopedia for Computer Science and Engineering, and so that is probably going to be the opus magnum of all encyclopedias on the subject. It'll be 6 volumes minimum in print and online access. So as to get all those components in place to produce this encyclopedia. It's a lot of work, but I'm one of several associate editors.
Do you have any strong outside interests that would enable us to understand you better?
Outside interests?
Or any outside interests that have had a shaping effect on your career?
No, just music. I always liked music. If I had to, if there was a second chance around, I might try music again. I always wanted to be a composer and a conductor. I guess since I was a teenager, around 15, my ambition was to go to the Juilliard School of Music and do that. And I started doing orchestrations when I was around 16, 17, 18. I realized that wasn't for me. So music has become a way of relaxation or a mental transport to, I guess, some of the aesthetical things of art as opposed to just science. So to me it's a healthy balance.
That's it. If you could change one decision that you've made along your career path, what would it be?
Gee, that's a tough one. I don't know. Sometimes you don't make. Sometimes decisions tend to be made for you because that's the way life goes. So I don't know if there's any one thing that would have made a big difference. I would probably do it again. I can't think of any one thing. If I think of something, I'll let you know.
Do you have any advice to young people starting out today, thinking about a career in computer science? What would it be?
Well, I think they should get away from being a geek. I realize computer science could be very technical, but it's just as technical as, let's say, chemistry or physics or biology, of course in different ways. And having done physics and math and engineering, you can have degrees in them. The thing I think students should have is an open mind, that they should do what they love, first of all. Very often computer science is viewed as something you do to get a job. You don't see people going in physics or biology or chemistry because they're going to get a job. Now, naturally, they would all like employment, but they don't study these subjects for that reason. But people tend to study computer science because there's going to be some kind of miraculous job at the end of the road, and of course now the reality is hit. So I think the attitude should be to do what you love and have an open mind about it, be diverse in your thinking, and you should just always do the best you can do. Okay? Our alma mater for the State University in New York is to become all you're capable of being. And if a student chooses to go into computing, notice I said computing, not necessarily computer science, that it is important for them to see computing in its full context, and as well as some of the social and legal issues. I teach the ethics and professionalism course at Hofstra, and so it's important that students see computing in the full picture as opposed to just lines of code. I think some of the people in computer science have really butchered that area to where the total focus of computing is on programming at the expense of everything else. And when you think about all the things that are done in computer science, programming is always a part of it, but it's not necessarily the major part of it. And many of our students who graduate don't even do programming. Okay, they were involved in other things. Programming is a vehicle for doing these things. Okay, so I think what they've done is to portray the image of geeks, people who work in front of inanimate objects, staring at a screen and working, hacking out code, and it's really turned off a good part of society against it. So I think computer science itself is in a lot of trouble.
I see. John, if there's one story that you want to tell that will be remembered, what would it be?
Gee, that's a tough one. A story. I don't know. Probably going back to my youth and my parents, sort of where we started out this discussion, that education is important. Repeating, people could steal everything from you, but they could never steal your education. I still can hear the voice of my mother and father. Learn as much as you can and put it in your pocket. You never know when you might need it. Some of the things that we learn, we think we'll never need or use, and then voila, we realize we need it. So I think the story from childhood that is very simple, and that is to value education, not necessarily for a job, but education is important for life. Perhaps one of the more moving things is I've been asked to go to the United Arab Emirates many times to evaluate their universities. I think I've been there 8 times over the last 4 years or so. There you see a culture where the sort of people are sort of ingrained in a traditional custom that they've had for centuries, and in particularly the women, who are basically subservient in their customary ways and not necessarily having a professional future for them. But it's marvelous to see what's going on there. The women outnumber the men 2-to-1 in engineering and computer science and all kinds of technical areas. Because of their traditions, you know that they themselves will probably not enter the professional world because the custom is that families arrange marriages and they're supposed to have children and things of that sort. But I could see that their children, which will make the new generation, I can see that their children will value education, and because their mothers and fathers value education, and that they will then, in effect, be at least spiritually or mentally liberated, so they then convey in a more natural way that feeling, and then actually become, in some ways, part of the professional societies that is there, the working and the managerial and whatever business and industry. So stories like that are good, and so I have to thank my parents for instilling that germ in me, and I did it on my own. Nobody paid for anything. I worked and I paid my tuition and things of that sort, and so you just do where life takes you.
Thank you, John. Is there anything else you'd like to add while we're recording?
No, there's probably a few other things I could will think about tonight and tomorrow, and I may add to it, and we probably could have another discussion another time on some other things, but I think it's there. So.
Okay, thank you, John. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to conduct this interview. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Alison.